Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Discourse About Nothing, the only philosophy podcast without a regular schedule, and that will never have one. I want to talk to you very briefly, 30 minutes or less, about the classical understanding of ethics and morality and how that might relate to art. Before I release a full video on lecturing over virtue ethics, kind of covering the spiel I used to give my freshmen in college when I would teach like ethics courses when I was an adjunct. The reason I want to do this in preparation is to kind of set the stage for that video, but also I think this video in itself is very interesting and useful because the classical way of conceiving of ethics is very, very different from our modern way for reasons that I've covered in my other writings, having to do with the Enlightenment paradigm shift in philosophy and science. And it's something that I think a lot of us would like to recover, seeing morality in this way. It has a lot of power to give our lives meaning and make sense of a lot of things in our little lives. So I think this topic actually has some practical value on some level. I guess I'll just jump right into it and keep it quick and choppy. The dominant theory of ethics until the Enlightenment was virtue ethics. Virtue ethics, very roughly, this is how I define it for my classes, it centers the question of good and evil, right and wrong, value and disvalue on two things. Being the right type of being, so fulfilling your potential in what you are, developing your character and developing yourself so that you are the right kind of thing. And those, you have the right personality traits and character traits, not just on a personality level, but even physically, right? That you're, as a biological organism, functioning properly. I mean, it embraces the whole being, not just psychology, but the whole being of a person. So it's being the right sort of thing and also doing the right sort of thing, doing the activities you're meant to do. And when you fulfill both those things, it's considered fulfilling your proper function or manifesting your telos, your teleology, the end that your nature intends for you, in some sense, that the end that is bound up with your essence and identity. Or maybe if you're a theist and if you're grounding ethics ultimately in God, it's manifesting and realizing the ideal, the end that God intended for you when he created you, or even before he created you. So virtue ethics is a family of ethical systems or an approach to ethics that emphasizes those two aspects of not just doing the right thing, but being the right sort of being, right? Developing yourself so that you are internally the right sort of being and externally you're engaged in the right sort of activities that you're supposed to be doing. And there's a lot of different ways to spell that out. Over different times, different thinkers emphasize different virtues. They codify the virtues in different ways. They codify the vices in different ways. They have different conceptions of what you're meant to be. Aristotle's view is a lot different than a medieval Christian's view on the actual content and substance. But what's important is that on virtue ethics, that the structure is the same. And I'll get into that in the next video. But what's important to remember about virtue ethics and about all ethics prior to essentially, I really think essentially utilitarianism and Kant, which are two different modern ethical theories. Prior to that, morality and ethics, morality is the subject, ethics studies. So ethics is a study of morality. Morality is not understood as a set of rules. It's not understood as a set of rules or principles for living your life necessarily. Morality has to do with the good in and of itself. So the good in that, what is it to live a good life? What is it to be a good person? but it's not just for human beings, it's for everything. Like, what is it to be a good dog? What is it to be a good horse? What is it to be a good tree? Right? And so morality isn't just a set of rules humans follow. It's not a set of divine commands. It's more, morality is how we are meant. It's hard to say. If morality is principles, then they're not principles that you follow for their own sake. They're principles for, if you follow these principles, you will be the sort of being you're meant to be. You will be your ideal self, internally and externally. You'll be internally the type of being with health, physical and mental and spiritual and moral health. And externally, you will be participating in the world in a functional way, in a healthy way. You'll have good relationships. You'll fit into the whole created order in the right way. You'll plug in the right way. So if morality is principles, it's not that the primary thing that a virtue ethicist and ancient and medieval and classical philosophy is considered with is not just a list of rules. There might be principles, there might be rules, but those are just ways of talking about and describing the good itself and how we're supposed to relate to that good. When you say that something is good, for Aristotle, for instance, what you mean is that it's fulfilling its function to some degree. It's fulfilling its nature, what it's meant to be to some degree, to some high degree. It's doing a really good job at being what it is and doing what it's supposed to do by its nature. And there are, like I was saying, moral principles you could give, right? Like for a human being, we might want to say, a modern virtue ethicist might want to say that it's never good for a human being to murder somebody. But it's not just about the rule, do not murder. It's about what is involved in the act of murdering. How does that affect your character? How does that affect your being? How does that shape you psychologically? How does that shape you emotionally? What does that do to the world outside of you? How does that alienate you from the person you're murdering? How does that deprive the world of the person you're murdering? How does that shatter or take away from the unity and beauty of the world and the world system you're a part of? It's not just a matter of rules, it's a matter of preserving the unity and health of you as an individual organism and also the entirety of creation or the world outside of you. So I could talk about Aristotle and Plato, but I really want to approach this from classical to medieval Christian thought. So I really want to focus on, second century, but really especially third century to around the 1600s. And I mean, it continues today, but third century to 1600s, how did Christians and theists apply this sort of idea? How did they think about morality in their virtue ethical systems? So I'm not talking about moral principles here. I'm taking one step above ethics and doing meta-ethics. What is morality? What are these principles doing? And for the Christian tradition, most modern people do not understand this. It's a very foreign way of thinking. But again, ethics and morality, if there's any principles and rules or laws there, they are rules and laws that are conducive towards the health of the individual and the health of the entire created order. So for someone like St. Maximus the Confessor, his idea of morality, like when he talks about ethics and morality, he does not talk about a series of rules or anything. Of course he follows rules, of course he has moral beliefs and convictions and principles and values, but he describes a more cosmic vision of reality, of the good. And he essentially says, look, God created the world with certain things in mind, with the essences or natures of things in mind. And he is like the divine artist that he is. He's creating a beautiful creation, an the whole cosmos, the whole of existence outside of himself is one big unified organism. The cosmos is one unified organism. And its parts, me and you, animals, and even non living things, right? On all the different planets, even though Maximus wouldn't have known about the universe outside the solar system, but all of the creatures in the universe, all of the individual created objects and beings are parts of this greater organic unity, this organic whole, the organism that is the cosmos. And Plato thought this too. Plato considered the cosmos as a gigantic living being, and then we are all of its parts as well. This is a very Platonic and Neoplatonic thought. But that organism as a whole, God is intending it to be a certain way, and also intending, he has ideas in the divine mind. For Maximus, he would call those logos spermaticoi, or the seminal logos, the seeds and the natures that he plants in things. He has intentions for the whole and the parts that would make it a flourishing, healthy, beautiful work of art as a whole, and also at every level, so that there's this level of hierarchical organization in creation, that everything comes together and in their own special ways. Each different created thing or each created species has a function, has an identity and a nature, an essence that God sets for it, and they're intended to contribute to the organic, the organism, the cosmos as a whole, in their own way. And by doing that, they resemble the divine ideas, and thus they resemble the mind of God in their own special way. So it's not that everything has the same purpose, but they all participate in God, who is the good, who is the beautiful, who sets the standards of morality just by being what he is. Again, it's not a divine command theory. It's that God is goodness itself. And each species contributes to the whole of creation by resembling the idea that God sets. It's just like when a house builder or an architect designs a house. Before the house is built, there's a blueprint of the whole thing, and there's also a blueprint of all the parts. And those parts need to be in the right places. They need to be doing the right thing. They need to be internally composed in the right way so that the house is built successfully, right? And the measure of success, the goodness of each of the parts, is, do they correspond? Are they similar to, and how similar are they to the original intentions of the designer, right? And seeing it in this way as, yes, the architect could write down principles of these things. He could write down rules for all the parts to follow. But those rules are really just important because what they're doing is describing how everything's supposed to fit together in this unity. So for someone like St. Maximus the Confessor, and this is true of the broader Christian tradition, this is also true of the Platonic and Aristotelian non-Christian views. Morality is about how we fit into the broader cosmic organism. The divine is trying to create a beautiful work of art out of the cosmos, where all the parts and the whole are in harmony. It's got the classic, some of the classic values in this sort of classical thought are beauty, but beauty is really emergent from, or beauty is goodness manifested to the senses. So there's no stark division between beauty and goodness, but the marks of beauty are like things like unity, order, rational ordering, harmony. And in music, harmony of notes over time, and the rational structure of music is beautiful, and then we experience that through our senses as a sensory beauty, because it has those internal good traits of unity, harmony, order, and certain rational relationships. But the whole created order God is intending to make with these sort of, unified, harmonious. He's trying to make it beautiful. Let's put it this way. He's making it beautiful. And how you make something beautiful is to make it good in a lot of different ways that appeal to the senses and to the mind. So beauty is just goodness that is manifested to the senses and the mind. So what God is doing in creating is like an artist making something beautiful. And what that is he's making something good that has unity, order, rational structure, that can be sensed through the senses, and that hits us and observers like us in a pleasing way. And our job is to play our role in that to the best of our abilities, so that the whole artwork completes itself. And most of these fathers, the church fathers in the Christian tradition, they don't think that God just does that all at once. They think it's a progressive unfolding through time, and that in our individual lifetimes, we are just born into this world at a certain stage of development. The world is a seed that is growing over time. It's developing. The acorn as a whole, the cosmos as an acorn, right, is growing into that big, beautiful oak tree. And our job as the parts of the acorn are to help that whole thing, us included, develop into the most beautiful oak tree it can. In modern terms, knowing more we do about science, you have these insane biological epochs and eras, a lot of different forms of life. You have this gradual evolution over billions and trillions of years of the universe. It's a really beautiful thing. We're in our current stage. We don't know where it's going to go, but we have our role to play in doing our best to ensure that whatever the next stages are, we've done our best in this stage to make this stage right now beautiful, but also to contribute to the whole history of the world and to the further development into the future. On an individual level, on a collective species-wide level, and whole of creation. So, on this way of seeing things, morality is really about being a good seed. Morality is really about helping the universe germinate and ourselves germinate and grow and develop into what we can be. When you do something evil, and again, I'm focusing on St. Maximus, but this is true for the rest of the tradition too. When you do something evil, there is no evil that exists independently of good. It's not a dualistic system. There's not good over here, that's God. There's not evil over here, that's the devil. There's just goodness. And goodness is just God himself and the health and flourishing of his creation that he's given existence to. Evil is just taking that away, is just reducing the health, reducing the unity, reducing the functioning, and again, the organic harmony of the entire creation or part of it. And when you do that, you're moving it further away from being all that it can be, but you're also destroying things and taking them out of existence. And you are depriving the world of them, depriving them of being. And I won't get into what exactly this means right now, but the Christian tradition says that when you do evil, it's basically it's the contrary of being. So that the more evil you do, the less and less existence you have, the less being you have. Evil is just moving towards non-existence or annihilation. Goodness is moving towards the fullness of being. God himself, who is existence and being and reality itself. So that, again, morality isn't just about principles on this way of seeing things. It's about moving towards unifying the whole creation, moving towards beautifying the whole creation, including ourselves, and fulfilling that function God set for us to be a beautiful whole, be a beautiful artwork. Um, and when you do something evil, what you're doing is you're taking away the unity of the created order, even if it doesn't affect other people. Think about it this way. And again, this is something that's very clear to me and that I think about a lot because, it's prevalent in our culture and we all struggle with it. But an important thing is that with like pornography and lust and things like that, adultery, people will say, well, it's not hurting anybody. If I have like ethically created porn or something, it's not hurting anybody. Or if I hookup culture, it's not necessarily hurting anybody. And if you're honest, it's hard to show how does that hurt somebody, right? In a direct material way. Well, it might not. It really might not. I think we should admit that. But what that type of sin does is that sin is a chronic wasting disease. It's disintegrating the whole of creation. It's taking it further away from its goal, and it's taking unity. There goes my camera. It's taking unity and it's breaking it down, right? It's taking harmony and order and structure and breaking it down. It's taking healthy objects and making them less healthy. And even if it only affects you in some way, or even if it doesn't have any long-term bad material effects on anything, financially, or it doesn't kill anybody, right? Or it doesn't even cause anybody a sensation of pain. The problem is that when you look at porn and lust after something, the idea is that, one thing you could say is that you're objectifying another human being. And in your mind, you're reducing them to a mere instrument of your pleasure. You're not really considering them for all they could be. And again, that does not cause a sensation of pain in anybody. That does not cause us physical pain. It does not cause an experience of pain in the person you're objectifying. But what it does is it is, in a sense, not treating the creation with respect. The respect it deserves. And which, if you were being really honest, you would know that if you're going to objectify somebody, you need to do it in a way that you're not fully objectifying them. You're aware of their value. But in something like porn, you might be theoretically aware that, oh yeah, this porn star has value or whatever, but it's not like a real reality to you. Your mind is disconnected from their inherent value, and you're just using their image or using what they do for your own pleasure and treating them as a tool. Maybe that's a bad example, but there's sort of like a cognitive disconnect between you and their value, and you're treating them as a tool. The claim of Christian thinkers is that in a bunch of different ways that essentially is destroying the unity of the world. And that unity is not something that is a physical sensation. It is an overall state of the world. It is something that I don't want to call it abstract, but it is a state of unity. It's like the unity of a nation is not a physical thing, right? It's sort of like a state of affairs, but we know it's real. Another example, maybe the porn wasn't a good one, but their essential claim is that it's not just like porn is bad, that's the rule. Lust is bad, that's the rule. The claim that they're putting forward is porn and lust and those sorts of things take apart that unity of the cosmos internally and as a whole in some way. And there's a bunch of different ways of unpacking that. I'm not doing a very good job arguing for it. But things like theft, right, has a bad effect on people. But it's not just that it takes money away from somebody. Who cares about money? Money, who cares? It's that the result of that is that there's a breakdown of trust in a community. There's a breakdown of trust between two people. There's a violating of an inner moral conscience, maybe, that takes the person's internal unity and breaks it apart a little bit. Things like one of my favorite examples, and one more clear that I could explain, is greed and materialistic consuming. Um, Maximus Confessor also writes about this at length. So does Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, and Gregory Theologian, and Origen have some really good things to say about this. But essentially, look, when you hoard material objects, when you hoard money and do not distribute your wealth um, through charity to other people, what you're essentially doing is you're taking a lot of the pleasures of this world and the comforts of this world and resources and giving them all to yourself while other people are suffering. And there's kind of a state of disharmony that comes from that, of disequilibrium, right? Where you are having more and more and more pleasure, but these other people, because you're not distributing to them and maybe even taking from them, is the reality that if you're getting super rich, you're taking from someone. You're creating this imbalance, this disharmony. And for the Christians who are super uber capitalists and libertarians, yes, these church fathers did actually teach this. You can read it in their books. What St. Maximus in particular says is, look, if you have all this wealth, God wants you to equalize things, to bring restoration of harmony, to bring these people down here more pleasure and more well-being, even if that removes some of yours. So there's an overall he literally says a better distribution of goods, right? Not goods in the sense of material objects, but a better distribution of goodness, of functioning, of health, of unity, of equilibrium in the entirety of creation. So me giving my money to a homeless person has the potential that it's not just helping that one person in their material needs. It is it's one little step towards bringing the entire created order into a better harmony, right? I'm divesting myself, my excess, so that I can bring other people up to my level more, so that the goods of life are distributed to everyone more, so that they could be more fruitful as well, do that for others, and also themselves as good seeds. Now they have more resources so that they could grow into all that can be. So things like charity are good. Like if I had a principle, be charitable. That's a rule, right? Moral rule, be charitable as much as you can. Um, it's not the rule that's important. It's that if you follow the rule, the entire created order is going to be healthier. The Christian tradition, in its ethical thought, takes this grand cosmic look at things. It steps outside of the individual. It steps outside of even the human species, and it looks at the entirety of creation and says, this thing's intended to function a certain way. This thing is going to be healthy in a certain way. Let's figure out how to help that along. I'm part of that, so it involves developing myself, but also I am part of the whole, and so I have a role to play. So I've got to be the right thing inside so that this creation has harmony inside of me, what I am, and I have to do the right thing that is conducive, me fitting into the overall harmony and health of the cosmos. That's how the Christian tradition sees ethics and morality. That's also, like I was saying, how they see aesthetics. There is no fundamental distinction between beauty and goodness. In fact, in Greek, the word kalē can be used for either, right? Goodness or beauty. That's why, when you read some translations of Plato and Aristotle, you can translate a lot of things as, well, a good man, but also the beautiful man, or a beautiful character. A beautiful soul is also a good soul, right? So yeah, that is, in a nutshell, how the Christian tradition thinks of virtue ethics, and kind of has this cosmic orientation to this cosmic conception of morality. It's not just a rule book. if there are rules, if there are principles, those are really just ways of describing the flourishing and unity of the cosmos as a whole. Think of it like this. You are a seed. You are a plant. You are a seed growing into a plant at a certain stage of development. You're going to keep growing throughout your life. And, if Christianity is true, you're going to keep growing throughout eternity as well, towards God, towards perfection. But you're a seed. And the cosmos as a whole is a garden. And the garden itself is in a state of development. But let's just say that garden starts as a bunch of seeds. In an empty patch of land, there's just a bunch of seeds. The seeds over time gradually open up and start developing. The garden's growing. We come in at a certain state in the evolution and development of that garden. And it's our job as the individual plants, as the individual, seeds or plants in the garden, to sprout as big and beautiful as we can, and then to reproduce, not just literally reproduce other humans, but to reproduce spiritually, morally, to ensure that other people and other parts of the garden are healthy. The cosmos is a giant ecosystem. We are animals, the highest of animals on this planet, but we are animals meant to steward ourselves and steward the earth and grow, right? And help it grow. And one day that garden is going to come to a state of completion, or maybe it won't. Maybe it will just keep growing, but it's going to be a lot more complete than it is now as creation unfolds. Maximus and Origen are both really, really good sources to read on this type of stuff. But it's going to be an unfolding of creation, of this organic garden growth. And morality is kind of like how we grow, like the way we're supposed to grow. You could say it like there might be a farmer's almanac or like a rule book or a guidebook for how to grow a really nice crop in the garden, how the plants could be really healthy, but the book isn't important. What's important is the actual growing and health. The book just helps you get there. The rules help you think about and recognize how you're going to grow, they help you get there. But the important part is that the growth itself is the good. And the more and more we grow and match the gardener's original design intentions, that degree to which we're growing in accordance with what we're supposed to be, that's our degree of goodness, right? And again, this way of thinking about morality and ethics is, I have never found a Christian author prior to the 1600s that does not think like this. I've never found a theologian that does not think like this. And even today, every Eastern theologian thinks like this. The Catholic Church still thinks like this. Most informed, educated Christians still take this approach. There's a cosmic significance to our lives, to our development. That's how we frame morality. It's not a system of rules. That comes with the Enlightenment. And it's 33 minutes, so I'm going to go to 35, and then I'll stop. What happens in the Enlightenment is that because empiricism takes on more than ever the view that knowledge is limited to or derived from and thus limited to sense experience, we are stuck in the realm of phenomenology, how things appear to us. We can no longer metaphysically speculate on the true nature of reality out there. We are kind of stuck just on dealing with the appearances of things and our psychology. We cannot have these lofty metaphysical speculations anymore. We limit it at that. And therefore, all the stuff I'm talking about the unity and harmony of the cosmos, none of that's really empirical. All of that's kind of abstract. It's not just empirically verifiable. Same with the existence of God. Same with moral values that aren't rooted or defined or reduced to just empirical reality. And so in the Enlightenment, you get theories of ethics and also aesthetics end up relativizing all of ethics and aesthetics to the psychological. So you have David Hume's ethics ethics is really just living consistently with that somewhat universal set of preferences and emotional sentiments that human beings share socially. Again, I'm not saying it's subjective on Hume's view. What I'm saying is that morality is rooted, the objectivity of morality is rooted in the somewhat objective moral sentiments of mankind, which is something that we could be aware of phenomenologically through experience. We all know we have certain moral sentiments and values. It doesn't require anything abstract like Platonic forms or God. It's very empirically oriented. Kant, going further than Hume, but still developing off of Hume, relativizes morality to the rationality that is universal within humans unless they have a disability or are women or black or something or native. Kant, his ethics can get you into weird places. And he was kind of racist and sexist and all that, but I still like Kant. I think you can rescue it from that. But Kant's view is that essentially the morality is really just the dictates of reason and not cosmic reason, the logos, God himself, the mind of God or whatever, or this cosmic abstract structure of reason and rationality. No, it's literally the reason within rational beings. The nature of the reason within rational beings dictates certain things like consistency. And so really all morality is being rational and consistent in fairly limited ways. Anything else that's more speculative, shy away from that. Utilitarianism relativizes the definition of good or intrinsically valuable is just or let's put it this way, the only intrinsic good or intrinsically valuable thing is pleasure. And we know that through experience. The only intrinsically bad or evil or disvaluable thing is pain. And there's different levels of nuance you could have with utilitarianism, different types of pleasures and pains. But the point is, those are certain types of mental events, of experiences things have, right? It's not the nebulous idea of harm, which could be spiritual harm or ugliness or things that are more abstract. No, it's the sensations and experience of pleasure and pain. So it's this enlightenment, it's called the inward shift. We're shifting everything to the realm of phenomenology, which is a study of how the world appears in experience, not the study of how the world really is, because in the Enlightenment, empiricism ends up undercutting all of metaphysics and just leaving us restricted to what we can experience. And we're just talking about how the human mind and how the world appears to the human mind. We're kind of stuck in that. So all the speculative morality, all the speculative metaphysics, all the stuff about theology, you just got to throw that away, essentially. Unless you find a clever way like Kant to sneak God back in, but then it'll still be very limited. So on that system, morality and ethics just become a set of principles for how to live consistently with some of our already held values, or a set of calculations and rules that will maximize pleasure and minimize pain. And you start to get this conception of morality that is just basically a set of principles or rules. With Kant, it's literally a set of imperatives, right? Of law-like statements that reason dictates to you. And then in reaction to that, the people who are still religious after the Enlightenment develop like these very simplistic divine command theories where the good is literally just like what God commands. Because they too, even though they still believe in God, they've lost faith in the ability of metaphysics to be able to say something about metaphysical realities like maybe the form of the good, or these abstract, immaterial, non-experientially observed moral realities like goodness, value, beauty. They've still lost faith in that, but they've held on to God. So they say, okay, well, God just commands us to do things. And the idea of a command or an intention in God is psychological, so we understand that better just through experience. And so we've essentially then really reduced morality down to just kind of like a book of rules that God gives us, like the Ten Commandments or something. And that's all because, again, of the limitations of empiricism that leads to an inward shift or a psychologizing or internalizing of everything. Whereas before, we were much more free in our philosophical systems to build these speculative metaphysics and metaethical systems that talked about the unity of creation as a whole, that I find very beautiful. And I believe, even though there are problems and you have to update those now, but, you know, until the 1970s, from like the 1700s to the 1970s, empiricism won. And it reached its climax in logical positivism in philosophy. And still today, we're still living with the effects in science and philosophy and everything of just this very narrow limiting effect of empiricism. And broad brushstrokes narrative, that's the best I can describe it, right? So that is kind of how the shift happens, why we start conceiving of things as a rule book. But prior to that, morality is not just a bunch of rules a jerk God or a bunch of rules that I as a jerk impose upon you. Morality and beauty and goodness are this organic reality about the overall state of the world and my place in it. And I like that. So we'll talk about virtue ethics next time more. And then eventually I'll talk about the inward shift, but I'm still doing research on it. Or the inward shift. Still doing research on it, so that'll come about eventually. But until then, I will see you all next time.